Sorry. Friends, we did not have a Bible study this week, so I'm going to tell you about how I missed it. We're going to try something a little different, a little new. So during the reading today, I hope that you think about the following questions. What stands out for you in the stories? What questions do you have? What surprises you? What assumptions have you made? Is there a word that resonates with you, or do you see a place of connection to your life? So as you hear the story today, think about those.
Our reading today is from Mark chapter 2, verses 1 to 22. When he had returned to Capernaum after some days, it was reported that he was at home. So many gathered around that there was no longer room for them, not even in front of the door, as he was speaking the word to them. Then some people came, bringing to him a paralyzed man, carried by 4 of them. And when they could not bring him to Jesus because of the crowd, they removed the roof above him, and after having dug through it, they let down the mat on which the paralytic lay. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Now some of the scribes were sitting there, questioning in their hearts, "Why does this fellow speak in this way? It is blasphemy. Who can forgive sins but God alone?" At once Jesus perceived in his spirit that they were discussing these questions among themselves, and he said to them, "Why do you raise such questions in your hearts? Which is easier to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Stand up and take your mat and walk'? But so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins," he said to the paralytic, "I say to you, stand up, take your mat, and go home." And he stood up and immediately took the mat and went out before all of them, so that they were all amazed and glorified God, saying, "We have never seen anything like this." Jesus went out again beside the sea. The whole crowd gathered around him, and he taught them. As he was walking along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. And as he sat at dinner in Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were also sitting with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the scribes of the Pharisees saw that he was eating with sinners and tax collectors, they said to his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" When Jesus heard this, he said to them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." Now John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, and people came and said to him, "Why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" Jesus said to them, "The wedding guests cannot fast while the bridegroom is with them, can they? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast on that day. No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old cloak. Otherwise, the patch pulls away from it, the new from the old, and a worse tear is made. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the wine will burst the skins, and the wine is lost, and so are the skins. but one puts new wine into fresh wineskins.
Here's what we're going to do. There's 3 stories, but we're going to do it in half. The first half, with the men and the roof and the paralytic, and then we'll go to the other half. And I do have 5 minutes. Is there a word that stood out? Is there a thought you had? Yeah, Jesus says their faith, son, their faith has saved you. Not the man who's lowered. This man has no, in movie speak, like when you talk about movies and women in movies and whether or not they're like the sexy lamp, do they have any motivation? Do they do anything? This man did nothing. He laid there. Everyone did it around him. It was his friend's faith. That's wild. I don't know that I'd ever noticed that before this year. Yeah, what we do for each other is important. And who lowers me? Who cares for me? Who, I don't know, looks out? Offers us as prayer? Offers us as a... I wonder what you think is easier, to say your sins are forgiven or get up and walk. Jesus says it's easier to say, which is easier, your sins are forgiven or stand up and walk. It seems like it, right? Because no one knows if your sins are, like, you can't prove it. You're just assuming.
So it's bothering me that his sins seem to be tied to his infirmity.
Yeah, there's a way to look at it like that. I wondered if it's not, does anyone have an idea of how they're not tied to each other?
Right, he had to, his sins had to be forgiven. A year ago, it occurred.
It could be that. It could be they, like, right, these friends lowered him hoping he'd be healed, right? Like, they were like, we want him to walk. Like, this is our goal. And Jesus answers like, the most important thing is not walking. So I'm going to take care of that. And so maybe it's like, you're lowered and your sins are forgiven and now you're whole. Like, walking is just a bonus. Do you notice they couldn't get in the front door with their friend, but everyone got out of the way as soon as he picked up his mat and immediately walked out? Like, celebrity is funny. They just were like, oh, okay, I guess we'll just move. At the time, the distinction of like nobody can forgive sins, but God is that the priest couldn't forgive your sins either, but they could facilitate the actions, like the sacrifices, the things that would forgive your sin. I mean, probably the same, right? Like I can't do it for you, but I can be like, I'm pretty sure God does it for you. At the time, which is easier? The prophets, there were people doing healing all of the time, but only God can forgive sins. So like for us, it makes sense, right? The sins would be the easiest because no one can prove it. But like everybody, it seemed like all of the prophets and all of the people were like making someone get up and walk. So like really, which is the easiest? If any of the prophets can get up and walk, maybe the easiest is to say, get up and walk. It's a little, I don't know, maybe. I see skepticism. That's okay.
With the stage, and I think of these revival meetings or something.
Where things are staged and
Yeah, and somebody comes up and just, hit them on the forehead. So,
there was probably some staged healings at time, but I like to hope some of them weren't. Close enough. Oh, I turned it off. I added pictures of roofs. I don't know what the roof would have looked like, but clearly it was going to be enough that you could dig it open. So were some roofs. That one just seemed sad. Those were our questions. And that's the last half about Levi the tax collector, fasting and wines. Did anything stand out to you? Any questions you have?
ones you want to be with were people who needed homes.
Yeah.
You know, if in our church, a person came in with some rags, you know, all I heard, somebody was, we would, some of us, most of us, let's fix ours. Or I hope we would say, you're welcome. Like the last hymn.
Yeah.
said, and that's what this is.
Right? Who's the church for? Everyone who's like feeling good, which is fine. Like that exists too. But Jesus was like, I should be hanging out with these people, the tax collectors, the sinners, the tax collectors who are sinners. I can't come up with a modern job that's the same as a tax collector. Basically, the tax collector would go to Rome and they'd be like, I can give you this amount of money. I can give you $1,000 a month. And I'm going to charge it for use of fishing off this pier. And so then they would set up a little booth. And everyone who would go to fish off that pier, they would charge whatever. And you do the math, right? If like 100 people at $10 or whatever that math is. And then they're like, so there's going to be 100 people at 10. Is that right? Was that math right? Good. They're going to like, 100 people will be there in a month. I'll charge them $10. But they're like, but I need to eat too. So why don't I double it? And they're doing it on the backs of the people, their own community, right? They live in the community. They were part of the community. And so some people are like, it's like the IRS, but like, they're like fleecing people. Like they're getting rich off the backs of other people who are not well off to begin with for the benefit of the empire. So I'm not, maybe you can come up with the job.
And literally just finished a book on the way here, called How Far It Comes. It was a wonderful memoir. And he was comparing, because he's kind of doing his dad's eulogy, and his dad had been on drugs his whole life, and then and he came to the story of the tax collectors, like he was dressed, and looking at versus the Pharisees, I think out of his head. He kind of equated the tax collector to being a drug dealer in a poor community where doing what you think you need to survive.
Yeah.
And rolling occupation, but at the same time, you've got the guilt of knowing what you're doing to the rest of your fellow people in your community.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I see that. Did you guys hear that? Comparing the tax collector to a drug dealer in your community. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Tax collectors, I have a funny relationship with taxes. I have no problem paying taxes if they go for certain kinds of activities. If they go for other activities, I have no problems. So I would equate politician.
Politicians.
They say one thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody, but yeah, and nobody wants to eat with them. No idea. Totally kidding.
What's so compelling, over and over we've seen this where Jesus says to people, follow me, and they, okay.
Yeah. There must be, it seems like there must be more. And or what is it about Levi's life that he's searching for something more? Like, you've got all the money, you can do whatever you want, but like, it's not enough. The things that are not enough. Yeah, we know nothing about his father. But the work of Jesus is about the sick, those who are in need of something. There's a need missing somewhere.
Is Jesus comparing himself to the bridegroom?
Yes, Jesus is the bridegroom. And so we should be celebrating, right? When if you're fasting, if weddings or something celebratory, and I don't know if in modern, but at least in ancient Jewish traditions, you would stop your fast. So if you're fasting for some reason, you'd stop your fast for the wedding, or some other feast day came up, you would stop that fast for the feast day because the celebration is almost more important. And maybe you would resume it. See, timers. Yeah. That may be why, people fast today, and I'm not very good at it. I get real hungry, which I mean is the point, right? And I'm always real, I say this a lot, Ramadan is a Muslim fast for a month, sunrise to sunset, but it's also a lunar calendar, so it shifts throughout the year. So if you're doing it now, like, excellent. It's like, I don't know, 10 minutes, right? I'm kidding. But when you're doing it in summer, right, you've got these 20-hour long days. It's not quite, but it's the long days where you're sunrise to sunset and you have to like eat at the end. It seems really difficult. I mean, it is really difficult. I am impressed. I give us some wineskins, some new wineskins. We're focusing on the wineskins for the last little bit. Sometimes the parable or the metaphor of the wineskins is used to shame. To shame what's gone before, to be used as if the old way of church is wrong and we shouldn't do it, and what's old will never choose to change, or that we should change. And all of that might be true, maybe. It's hard to change sometimes. But what's interesting about the story is that putting new wine will continue to ferment, and it'll expand, and there'll be gases, and all of these things will happen. And if you put them in an old wineskin that will no longer expand and grow like a new leather will, it will burst it. And Jesus isn't saying that there's one that'll ruin the wine and everything will be terrible. He's saying it'll ruin both the wine and the wineskin. And by not putting the new wine and the old wineskin. By putting them both in new, you're saving both. There's a saving and a care for the old wineskins, the way we've always done things. Maybe Jesus is saying that there's a place to do all of the ways of worshiping together that we have always done, of new ways and old ways of worshiping together. One of the things that I really enjoy about this community, too far. One of the things I really enjoy about this community is that Sunday morning. That's what you get, button things off. Oh, it's better. Never mind. Is that, well, we treat this time in our community and our prayers and our practice of light and worship together as sacred. We don't really take it seriously. Like, we know it'll be imperfect. The bread might crumble and the crumbs on the floor. The tech will fail us a lot. Sometimes I will fail the tech and not turn it on. The kids will choose not to participate. There will be imperfect notes. It's no judgment, but there will be imperfect notes from our songs. Our worship will be imperfect, like our lives. Our worship is the practice of imperfect people trying, learning, failing, and trying again and again to live our lives in community. And we, friends, are never going to be like the big churches over yonder. And we are never going to be like St. Mary's or St. Bruno's with their formal, do they still do smells and bells? I don't know, but I feel like smells and bells services, right? We could, but that's a lot of work. If we were to take what they're doing out there, or what they're doing, and try to pour it into our church, our Sunday morning worship, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't be as effective, and it would mostly just annoy us, all of us. And I'm not saying that there's anything that the other churches that are doing that is new or fancy that we couldn't try or that it's wrong, but it's not us. And thank God. Man, if we had the number of people, honestly, like the exhaustion and the anxiety that like the TV evangelists have when thousands of people, like, I don't know, that's too much. But also then we wouldn't know each other's names. We wouldn't know their kids' names, and we wouldn't know each other's struggles and our joys, and we wouldn't know who we're missing on a Sunday morning, who we need to check up on. We wouldn't be able to pivot and be creative, to try new things, to bring our whole selves as offerings. And this book, we're going to hear more about in the times to come. I suggested, I invited the council to read it, and they have, so ask them. We're going to be trying some new things, and we already are. We have decided what we can bring and part of our service to represent what's happening. It's all about engaging and participating in worship, like our conversation earlier. It's I'll stand up. Things we can do because we're small. It's things that could never happen with a big church. If a big church tried to pour question and answer into their Sunday morning service, it might be chaos. And because of our participation and all of our gifts and our talents and our silly ideas and all of our creative expressions, not just mine, but all of our thoughts on things, our worship becomes uniquely us. It becomes a beautiful expression and worship then to God. And because it is an expression of God in our lives, in our midst, and between all of us and beyond all of us, it becomes this beautiful work we do together. The liturgy, the prayers that we say, all of the parts that we do together, that is, the liturgy means the work of the people. It is the work we do together. And so this is an invitation that we're going to be doing some things together. Doesn't mean we're not going to be doing all new wineskin, new wine and old. We're just going to try some things. We're going to bring some things. We're going to offer more of ourselves to each other and an opportunity to share together. Yeah? We're going to give it a try? Do we have comments and questions?
You kind of reinforce what you said. We just have to embrace who we are.
Yeah.
We're not going to try to fit a square peg in a round hole. Maybe we just need to find our niche, who we are, and embrace
Who we are. Yep.
and just enjoy it.
Yeah.
In the room and sort of watching it. Right. You can't make us into something we're not. And then you might think you did in church and do something like this or something like that, but like I said, find out who we are and embrace it and go from there.
Yeah. And it turns out, I think you're all very talented people with lots of gifts and talents. We'll think about that as we go on. Friends, let's take a big breath.